my sales just completely died. That's not gonna pay my bills. Something isn't quite right. Hi guys, welcome back to All I Know About Depop. I recently experienced a really dry spell on Depop where my sales just literally fell off a cliff. In this video, I wanted to share what I did to get my sales back on track and give you guys 5 to-dos that you can put into practice if you're experiencing a dip in sales right now. So at the start of this summer, I experienced some of the worst Depop sales that I've had in ages. Now, normally there are dips in sales, there are good weeks and there are bad weeks, and I find that they tend to like cancel each other out and you end up with like quite consistent financial months. But during this period in June, my sales just completely died. I was hardly getting any notifications or messages and very few sales. During this time, I was very busy finishing the van and preparing to travel full time. So I was so preoccupied that I only actually noticed the drop in sales when I would get to my shipping days. Now, I ship twice a week, so only having 2 or 3 parcels every time I post. As a full-time reseller, that's not gonna pay my bills. So after a very few dry shipping days, I kind of realized this isn't probably a normal dip in sales. Something isn't quite right. Now, there definitely were some reasons why I think my sales dropped. The main reason being that I was so preoccupied with the van and the travel plans, I wasn't really giving much time to Depop. I was adding a lot less listings to the shop on a weekly basis, and I was a lot less active on the app. And that is one thing to note about Depop. I do not think it is something that you can just set up and leave. You can't just list 50 items and then leave it to make money. I think part of keeping the sales coming in consistently is constantly adding new listings and being active on the app. This is because every time you add a new listing to the shop, you pop up on the feed, and this essentially works as a notification to your followers of, you know, hey, I exist, come and look at my shop. If you leave your shop to just be, you will solely be relying on your listings to show up in search in order to make sales. Anyway, back to my dead Depop. In the end, I did manage to get out of this funk and get my sales back on track, and it was a mix of these next 5 tips that I want to share. But before we get into that, I just want to emphasize quickly before that the worst thing that you can do when sales drop is panic. All the worry and the stress that you feel about not making these sales, you really need to channel that into actions as soon as possible. The more time you spend panicking, the less time you have to put in the work to get your shop back on track. Feel the panic, but make sure you're using this as a motivation to work rather than something that's preventing you from working. I mean, this is definitely advice that I need to take myself. Financial stress is the worst, so look after yourself. Like construction, really? But as soon as you can channel that panic into actions, then that's your best bet of getting out of there and making money again. Number 1, list now. If you have stock that's not yet been listed, now is the time to list it. The more listings you have, the more chance you have to make a sale and the more chance you have in attracting people to your shop. If you can afford to spend money on stock, I would, and this follows nicely into tip number 2. Number 2, review your stock. It's a good idea when sales drop to look at your shop and consider whether it's your stock that is at full. There are 2 things that you should ask yourself. 1, is your stock good for this season? And 2, is there a good variety of different items on your shop? The first ensures that you actually have items that are desirable now, and the second means that you don't have all of your eggs in one basket and you're giving yourself more chances to make a sale. I actually spoke to a Depop seller fairly recently. I mean, maybe like a year ago, fairly recently, who had done amazing in the summer period, gone full time, but in the winter her sales just completely dried up. And she had reached a point where she was struggling to support herself, and she knew that if it carried on this way, she'd have to go and get another job. And what had happened is that she'd done numbers selling scarf tops in the summer, but when winter came, she hadn't updated her stock. And as less and less people wanted to buy summery scarf tops, she had made less and less sales. I imagine she reached out at a point where she was probably, you know, starting to panic a little bit because it is quite a scary place to be. Going from making good money and being able to go into it full time to then 6 months later be making like not enough money to get by is like heavy stuff. But it was actually just a simple fix. She had this like girly aesthetic that people loved in the summer, and she just needed to apply her vibe to winter stock. And if she had updated her stock to winter items, then likely she would have been making even more in the winter, because items like jackets and jumpers have larger profit margins than scarf tops. Number 3, reshoot items. Photos are so important on Depop, and bad photos or bad styling could be the sole reason why an item isn't selling. I actually have a really good example of this recently on my shop, where I updated a photo of an item and this item went on to be a really popular piece on the shop. So I bought these dead stock crochet tops last summer, and I brought loads of them because I thought they would be a complete hit. And to my surprise, I hardly sold any of them. Cut to this summer and crochet is even more on trend than last summer, and I'm thinking these tops really should be selling. So I redo the photos, and I think the next day after I post the new listing with the new photos, I sell 2 of them. And since then, they've been really popular on the shop. So this is the before photo. I'm not sure why I chose to model it with a turtleneck. I think I went through a phase of modeling lots of items on Depop with white turtlenecks, and I don't think it was a great styling decision. And here are the updated photos. I chose to do a flat lay as well as some modeled with a denim skirt, and I decided not to model with a turtleneck on these ones. And now people are actually checking out. Number 4, relist items. So the keyword here is relist, not refresh. Relist. And what I mean by this is clicking the 3 dots in the corner of the listing, clicking copy to a new listing, adding the same photos, and then posting this listing, and then deleting the old listing. Now, this is something that I've discovered recently, which I think allows you to get more eyes on your shop without having to add brand new listings. By relisting items, you make them pop up here on the explore page. Bear in mind that your followers aren't likely to know that this is an old listing. So to them, it's something new to check out on your shop, and in general is a reminder that your shop exists and to come and have a browse. Number 5, play with price. My final tip is to play with price. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean to put the price down. Actually, I think you can encourage sales by putting the price up sometimes. For example, if you're listing a really nice vintage leather jacket for £20, you'll find at that price that is on the cheaper end of leather jackets on Depop. When a shopper is looking for a leather jacket, they're going to be browsing Depop and seeing leather jackets from £10 to £100. If they're looking to buy one that is quality, chances are they're gonna assume that in order to buy one that is of a certain quality, that they're gonna have to pay a certain price for it. And because of this, they might make the assumption that your leather jacket is on the cheaper end for a reason, whether it feels cheap or it's flawed in a way. Sometimes if an item seems too cheap, then the buyer may assume that it's a little bit too good to be true. I'm sure everyone can agree that they've made the mistake before of buying something super cheap online and then being gutted when it turns up and it's like a piece of crap. So bear in mind, if an item seems a little bit too cheap, the customer may be suspicious of the item and therefore not want to check out. Another thing to think about is adding items to a sale. There's actually a filter option on search when you're looking for items on Depop where you can select to just the items that are on sale. If you constantly have items on sale on your shop, then you have the opportunity to show up in that search. Okay, before I go, this is a bonus tip that I wanted to add. This tip makes it easier to put these 5 tips into practice. So if you're in a position where your sales have dropped and you're starting to panic, then what you need is really specific goals for each day. So instead of thinking, okay, I need to reshoot items, you need to be really specific about what that means. So for example, creating a weekly checklist that looks like this. So on Monday, you're gonna list 5 items, you're gonna reshoot 10 items and relist 5 items. On Tuesday, you're you're going to list 5 items, relist 5 items, and change the price of 5 items. I find that these specific goals are a lot more easier to achieve than, say, you know, make sales. And they give you a checklist on what you can do to keep you focused on getting them sales back. Okay, so they are my 5 to-dos for getting yourself out of a dip in sales on Depop. It was a good mix of all of these, which helped me to get my sales back on track. So hopefully they can help you guys too. My next video is going to be all about cross-listing and the importance of not just relying on Depop. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye. Number 1, list now. I have a lisp. I think my tongue bar makes me have a lisp. Number 1, list now.